Oh, okay. I think we're off of that. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's do it. Thank you so much for coming. It's so good to see you.
This is great.
Welcome everyone to the launch of AI Plus Careers. Oh, come on in. Perfect timing. This is a new event series that we are hosting at the Special Competitive Studies Project, and we could not be more excited to tackle all things AI plus the future of work. Just a quick note about SCSP for those of you who are new to the family. The Special Competitive Studies Project is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, tech-centered national security project launched by Dr. Eric Schmidt and led by Ili Bayraktari. Our mission is to make recommendations to strengthen America's long-term competitiveness as AI and other emerging technologies are reshaping our national security, economy, and society. It's a big, lofty goal, but that doesn't stop us. We're here to get after it. AI Plus Careers. This new monthly event series is a continuation of the excitement and curiosity on display at our recent AI Expo's Talent Marketplace. For those of you who live in the DC area, you may have seen some buses, some other advertisements, but we hosted a very large AI Expo for national competitiveness at the DC Convention Center, May 7th and 8th. At that Expo, we had a talent marketplace, which was really the genesis for AI Plus Careers. It was a one-stop shop where people could come, people gave flash talks about their work, of recruiting opportunities, about their thoughts on the future of work, what's happening at their institution, initiatives or programs that they are launching, and so on. We had lots of AMA, lots of great discussion, and lots of organic networking. And some people got internships, jobs, and learned a lot about future opportunities. So this is really trying to recreate that magic or continue that momentum by helping our network navigate the changing nature of work. What does the impending AI transformation mean for you? And how can we leverage AI as a career opportunity? Each event in this series is designed to spark inspiration and action for early to mid-career professionals. And all of our events will feature a speaker and then followed by discussion and networking opportunities. So thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. We really appreciate it. I am so excited today for our launch to be joined by the one and only great Sam Combs, who is the head of public sector for Coursera. And as I'm sure you all know, you may have heard of Coursera. They are a very active player in the AI education space and have a lot of insight and perspective on how the workforce is upskilling for AI, particularly in the federal space. Sam, thank you for coming. I chose not to read your biography intentionally because I wanted to start with a question where you can tell us about yourself in true talent marketplace fashion. Please tell us about yourself, your AI Plus career story, how you got here, and what you're doing now.
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you for everyone joining. It's incredibly exciting to be here. Thank you to SCSP. It's just been incredible what you all have accomplished so fast. I mean, I just can't believe the amount that you are doing so quickly across the space, the ecosystem you're pulling together. And yeah, we're thrilled to be able to be a part of it with you all. But yes, as Dana mentioned, I lead our public sector team at Coursera, where we have the privilege of working alongside federal, state, and local partners and helping them with upskilling their workforce. Overwhelmingly, as you can imagine, what we are hearing from public sector partners is a need and a focus on how do we build digital and technical skills across our employees to keep pace with change, and also to make sure that the organizations, the agencies that they're a part of can accomplish their mission how it needs to be accomplished today. And as you can imagine, over the past 6 to 12 months, AI has dominated the lion's share of those conversations. Nearly every discussion we're having, whether it's at the state, local, or federal level, is government leaders coming to us and saying, I need to build AI literacy yesterday, and I need help doing it at scale. Can Coursera help? And so I feel incredibly fortunate to be in the position to be part of some solutions that can be coming to government. I would say, kind of in the spirit of this event, the AI careers theme, I have a fairly atypical or non-standard pathway to this seat, to this role. I started in a non-technical capacity. So I started studying the Middle East in college. From college, went directly into public sector service. And so joined the military, was an intelligence officer for about 8 years, and was doing global intelligence operations for the first part of my career. And then in 2020, was given this tremendous opportunity to make a career transition or a career pivot to join Coursera. So I joined Coursera in 2020 to be part of what was then the recently established government team focused on building public sector partnerships at the state, local, and federal level. And I think, for me, the choice to do that, or the decision to make that transition, was born out of the realization and my own experience in government, which was oftentimes I would find we'd have a goal, we'd have an operational requirement, we'd have the right tools in place, we'd have leadership coming to us saying that we should go out and do those things. But oftentimes having the right people with the right skills in the right seat was the limiting factor. I remember being in an organization mid-career where we were trying to take all of the data that we had at our disposal from historic operations that span decades and use those to inform what our future operations were going to look like. Our leadership told us to do it. We had the data. We had organizational excitement around this goal, but we didn't have a person who had the skills to actually operationalize that requirement. They were literally checking out books from the library on SQL and on managing large databases. Right. And that lived experience was what informed kind of my energy and excitement in my current role of, I want to make sure that government has, at their disposal, tools and capabilities to build the skills you need across the public sector workforce.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And I'm so glad your pathway led you to where you are today. Let's just start at the beginning. Why is upskilling the public sector workforce on digital skills, especially generative AI, important?
Yeah, I love I always like starting with why and like the framing there. For me, I think even before getting to that specific question, I think the framing around the question is important. And what I mean by that is, I've had conversations over the past few months where you'll sometimes hear AI and generative AI, and this is both public sector as well as across industry, but positioned as just one of many new tools that are out there that maybe can improve efficiency on the margins, maybe can help you improve processes internally. It's just like one of many new, for lack of a better term, widgets that you could deploy across your organization. And I think it's important when we answer this question to push back on that framing. The founder of DeepMind, Mustafa Suleyman, wrote a book called The Coming Wave. And in that book, he talks about these 24 waves that have happened across history that have been the introduction of what he calls general purpose technology. This idea that it's technology that completely reshapes how the world looks and how humans interact across the world. And I mean, he goes back to discovering fire, domesticated agriculture, electricity, proliferation of the internet. And he says that we're in the midst of the 25th wave right now, and that's AI. And so if we accept that argument that AI is not just another tool or capability on the margins, but instead it's a technology that's fundamentally reshaping how we operate in the world, I think it puts clear the answer to that question of why is this important? Because it's going to redefine how, not just the public sector, how everyone operates globally. And coming from my Air Force roots, the analogy I give is not prioritizing upskilling around AI in the public sector is akin to a fighter pilot launching for a mission with no fuel in their jet. It makes no sense. Like it's impossible. Like it just doesn't work. But I also think it's important to note that I think SCSP has a great advantage on this, but my sense is the public sector, the government recognizes this reality, like the transformational nature of the technology. And it seems like there's shifts in policy and strategy documents that are responding to that recognition, where if you drill into the DoD and look there specifically, the AI adoption strategy released last year, one of the main pillars is a workforce requirement, is making sure that we have a skilled workforce around AI. And I think the word that they used in that section is what stood out to me, where they said AI adoption across the department depends on a skilled workforce. It's not a nice to have, not helpful, it's an actual dependent.
Mike. Allie?
You're putting down and fly.
Hi, I think we have a hot mic. Thank you.
So I love that.
Hi.
But yeah, so I mean, it feels like that language of it, this is a dependency, not a nice to have or something that's helpful on the margins. Feels like a recognition across government that the workforce can't just be something that's a secondary thought, that it has to be at the center of any sort of AI transformation in government.
So I love that I'm going to pull that thread a little bit. I love that you're using that strategy as an example. I know somebody who might have happened to be a part of authoring that section. And I wonder though, if there's a disconnect between people at the very top and everybody else, because it's really, and how do you kind of thread that needle or help make the case for the entire organization, not just the very top, but then when the rubber meets the road in terms of strategy implementation, so this is really the flip side of, I think there is a sense of the magnitude, the stake, the urgency from senior leaders across a lot of government organizations. I'm wondering if you're seeing that same sense of urgency and drive from a lot of the action officer level, a lot of the doers within the organization, as opposed to just the top.
Yeah, it is. I mean, so I was at a conference recently, that's the state level now, where we were engaging with administrative officers at the state level who were focused on managing the state workforce, the state government workforce. And one of the things that they were talking about, AI was at the center of this conference, and they were talking a lot about, one, how do we implement AI as not just agency by agency, but as a state across our workforce. The other recognition, though, they were saying was, we have to come up with policies and we have to respond to this, because if we don't, at the tactical level, people are using these types of capabilities already. Like, they're implementing AI in their day-to-day workflows. And if we don't come up with some sort of strategy and framing around how to do it ethically, responsibly, securely, it's not going to prevent people from using it already. And so it seemed, to answer your question in a bit of a roundabout way, but it seemed like to me, the other recognition that I've seen at the senior level is that, at more junior or tactical levels of the organization, there's not just an eagerness to implement and leverage these technologies. They might already just be using it, like using things like ChatGPT, implementing AI in their workflows in a way that, without kind of void of policy or void of structure around it, is just happening outside of the organization, actually leveraging it, if that makes sense.
It does. And I that's also a bigger economics question there too, about the productivity effect and, how we're measuring that. But back to the upskilling piece, do you think that there's, help level set the need here. Do you think that the majority of federal workers already know how to use these tools, are comfortable using these tools, appreciate responsible use of these tools for their organization and mission set? Where do you see the need?
Yeah, I mean, where we see the most demand right now is around the literacy level, where most organizations, I would say both at the executive or senior level, but even when we're down more at the operational level or the end user level, where we see the strongest demand for upskilling programs is help us build broad AI literacy across our workforce. And I would say AI literacy categorizes our buckets into a few different places. One is broadly like, what is AI and what is generative AI? Just, the fundamentals. The next is, broad insight into how do you leverage these tools, especially around prompt engineering. And then it gets into security and ethics around AI. Like, those four broad categories are where we typically see most organizations and individuals gravitate. And the first place that they're usually starting is, help me with AI literacy at scale. From there, then it typically shifts, and what we're seeing in terms of the demand signals that we're seeing across the federal government is it goes from broad literacy for all to applied skills for specific teams. So now thinking about, okay, do you have data scientists and data analysts inside of your organization? they're already deeply technical, they're already subject matter experts. How do you now build upskilling programs that can equip them with specific skills around AI or Gen AI to help them do their job better, even if they're already in a technical role? So it goes from broad literacy for all to applied skill sets for specific roles. Is where we're seeing, I think, the most energy.
And in terms of that energy, are you seeing energy from an organizational? So I will posit one, that there's heterogeneity or variation across different agencies for how engaged some of these workforces, and even organizationally, leadership might be in terms of AI adoption and prioritizing upskilling their workforce. But also, I wonder if there are different communities within organizations that might be more excited, willing, taking the initiative to think through use cases for AI, to upskill in AI. I'm wondering if from where you sit, if you're seeing trends in the type of public sector workers or organizations that are really going all in for learning AI.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how kind of granular you want to get. I would say at the high departmental level or the agency level, I think where we saw the earliest movement across our partner base was in the national security space, like at the federal level. I think looking at the Department of Defense, and then of course partners that we have across the intelligence community, those were some pockets of our partner base where we saw kind of the quickest movement towards not just how do we build data science skills or data analytics skills, but now let's really focus in on AI and generative AI specifically. That was where we saw the demand signal pop up, I think, the earliest. I'm curious what your hypothesis would be. Mine would be is the cost of inaction around national security with new technology is probably the most acute. And so to me, it made sense. I think there's also, I come from an intelligence background, so I may be slightly biased here, but I feel like there's very compelling use cases with AI and generative AI in the intelligence space, and especially when you're thinking about analytics. That also to me makes sense why some of those organizations might have been the earliest movers. That being said, it has been interesting at the state level where we saw kind of the most movement initially at the federal level. At the state net level now, we're seeing a tremendous amount of energy, and it's almost as if the executive level or the presidential level executive order was released last fall. Now we've started to see governor level and state level policy mandates that have come out that are pushing states to respond quickly as well. And so I would say even over the past few months, we've seen a tremendous amount of energy now coming from states thinking about not just how do I upskill our IT workforce, but how do we do that broadly, to go back to the literacy point, broadly across every state employee.
And thinking about the platform, the wealth of course offerings that are related to AI, and at different levels, noted that some are more foundational, so you can pick your own adventure. Which courses are you seeing as the most pop? First of all, you shared a really interesting statistic the other day. I'd love if you could share that again on the uptake of Gen AI courses on your platform. And then also, are you seeing trends in terms of which types of AI courses are the most popular, with particular emphasis on federal employees?
Yep. So in terms of uptake, and this will also come as no surprise, there has been an explosion of demand on our platform, both at the enterprise level when we're thinking about government partners and government employees that are working through Coursera, as well as at the individual learner or consumer level that are just coming to our platform. If we look just year over year, where we were at in 2023 versus where we're at this year, there's been a 10x increase in enrollments in AI and Gen AI content on Coursera. In 2024, we're seeing four new enrollments in Gen AI content every minute on our platform. And we've added about 400 additional courses around generative AI just in the past year. And so our content engine is responding by creating and releasing as much new content as we can. That's aligned to where we're seeing the strongest demand signal. And then we're seeing it in the market as well in terms of course enrollments and where people are gravitating on our platform. In terms of what people are really interested in, there's a few courses that stand out. One is just at the very high level, There's a course called Gen AI for Everyone and it's produced by our co-founder, Andrew Ng. And so that course, which provides just baseline fundamentals around generative AI, has been incredibly popular. To get more specific in terms of applied skills, there's a course from Vanderbilt called it's on prompt engineering. It's produced by a professor there named Jules White. And it really gets in depth and equips people with skills of how do you use prompts to really generate outcomes that are impactful, to move beyond just very basic utilization of a tool like ChatGPT and use prompting as a pretty significant up-leveling of your own work. And then, of course, produced by our CEO, Jeff Maggioncalda. He produced his own course called Using AI as Your Thought Partner. So moving away from thinking of AI as Google and using AI as like just a search engine, and instead using it as this tool that can improve how you're thinking about complex challenges. That AI as a Thought Partner course has been incredibly popular as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. And just out of curiosity, how do you decide, or is there a process by which courses can get added onto the platform?
Yeah.
And how does that work? And is there a ranking process? And just curious.
Yeah, we have a whole team at Coursera. So, I mean, what's unique about Coursera is one of the things that's unique is how we create content. We're not a true open marketplace in terms of anyone can come on and produce content. Instead, what we really rely on is institutional partners. So either leading universities or leading companies are the organizations that are producing the content on Coursera. And so we have an entire content team that one is looking at where are we seeing the strongest demand signals, both in the consumer portion of our business as well as the enterprise portion. So what are governments and what are businesses telling us are most important for their organizations in terms of skill development? And then we'll use that as the demand signal for then our content sourcing team, our industry partnerships team, and our university partnerships team to go source new content, to either bring in new industry or university partners, or to work with the existing partners that we have to put content into our content pipeline and get it produced. And so it's very much demand-based, and that's either institutional demand with businesses, universities, governments, or it's consumer demand coming from individual learners going onto the platform.
So I'm going to pull on that, and then we'll get to some questions if there are any. Otherwise, I can keep going, and then we can break up and do some networking. So one question, you know, thinking about this idea that you take the demand signal from organizations that you partner with. You're working with a lot of different federal agencies. You've noted that there is a demand for some AI upskilling and providing access to AI educational content. If you're a federal agency, where do you, or even just an organization, where do you start? So you've spoken in the past about workforce upskilling for AI that's scalable, stackable, and specific. So as people are navigating an upskilling journey, what that means for, in terms of organizationally or even personally, maybe you can expand on that.
Yeah, definitely. And I love frameworks and roadmaps that try to at least kind of push in a broad direction, I think, towards something that has the potential to have strategic impact for organizations. And so what Diana just outlined, this idea of upskilling programs that are stackable, they're specific, and then stackable. One thing I think is important to note before I get into more depth there is that realization has been informed by our work across the public sector. That is not Coursera marketing. That is what we've heard from government organizations that are pushing us to think about building programs that are truly impactful for their agencies. So the first is stackable or is scalable. So I think when you think about this challenge that the government is facing around AI upskilling, you just cannot deny the scale of the challenge. And I'll actually draw on some research that I've seen coming from you, where one of the things that I saw in a report that you released last year was, and it stood out, was that if you look across the past 2 decades and you look at the growth of technical roles in big tech companies, there's been a 4x increase in the number of technical roles in those big tech companies. When you look at the same time period and you look across the public sector or the Department of Defense specifically, there's been a 40% reduction in technical roles. That reality points to nothing but a need for upskilling at scale. We're not talking about hundreds of people. We're not even talking about thousands of people. It's how do you upskill tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of individuals around this topic? So I think that's the first piece, is you have to have solutions and programs that can really get to the scale to actually move the needle on a challenge. The second piece, though, is they need to be specific. This is the other thing that we've heard from governments, which is, okay, scale is good, but if it's not specific or relevant to my mission, we're kind of just confusing activity for impact. We're not actually moving the needle in a way that affects the mission, how we need it to be changed. And so you need to have, and I think historically public sector organizations have been forced to choose between one or the other. It was either launch a scaled upskilling program that maybe isn't highly specific to your organization, but at least it reaches a lot of people, or do something highly specific, but limit it to a handful of people through in-person cohorts. What we're thinking a lot about is how do we present opportunities for government partners to do both things at once, to not have to choose, to be able to reach the scale that's necessary to affect change at kind of the level that is needed, but also create highly specific programs that are aligned to the mission requirements of that organization. And the way I think about it is, you think about Coursera's content and platform for a government organization, what it really is clay. The content and the platform is clay that is designed to be molded for a government organization in a way that is hyper-specific to what their needs are. And then the final piece, and this is more aligned to like a broader talent management discussion, but is having upskilling programs that are also stackable as well. So now imagining a world where you can provide an upskilling pathway for an individual in your organization that in the immediate term, in days, weeks, and months, builds the technical skills you need to accomplish your mission, but also provides that individual in your organization with the credentials and the stackability of those credentials to then maybe go pursue a college degree, where they could take the credential they earned around this upskilling program and then use it for their own career mobility, maybe take advantage of a tuition assistance program in the DoD, stack that into a college degree, and now you have an individual in your workforce who has the near-term skills that you need, but is also motivated to stay in the organization because they see a pathway around career mobility as well. And I think stackability of the education is a key piece.
So thinking about advice, this is AI plus careers. A lot of people, there's a little bit of where do I even start? Whether you don't have a technical background, or even if you do, what advice would you have for people who are either, and this maybe it's different advice, or if you're a college student and you're trying to think about how you can learn about AI in a way that's going to help your job, you at your job, or if you're thinking about leaving your options open for future careers because you hear this thing called AI is really important to learn. You're just kind of futzing with ChatGPT in your spare time, but you haven't really made the connection to careers. And you hear a lot about how there's this movement and it's going to affect things, and you're not really sure. So whether you're in college just getting started, or whether you're a mid-career professional and you're being told that things are going to change and you might not have the right skill set, you need to figure it out. What advice would you have for how people could engage with content in a way that's not overly burdensome to that paralysis of just getting started?
I mean, one, it's going to come as no surprise, I think Coursera is a great place to start, but in all reality, I think there's a tremendous amount of resources out there too. And I think what has stood out to me at an individual or a personal level is until I really started to engage in content around prompt engineering, around some of these more foundational level courses, I didn't fully appreciate the impact that upskilling would have on my own ability to leverage these tools in my day-to-day job. And I think when I think about disruption and displacement that AI might cause to jobs, there's a discussion probably around replacement, but I think what there's probably an even more robust discussion around is the differentiation that will take place between those who know how to effectively leverage AI in their careers versus those who don't. And I think that's a really compelling thing to think about, which is rather than thinking about will AI replace my role, it's thinking about how can I leverage AI to supercharge my role and make myself irreplaceable. And I think the pathway to that reality is through deliberate upskilling and building the skills that you need to be successful. Separate from that, I know this is around AI careers. We've been talking a lot around all of the challenges that government is facing and how do you upskill the workforce at scale. And I would say, though, to go back to where I started, government service had a profound impact on my own life. Like if I'm thinking about for someone in college, like what do I want to do with my career? There's AI, like where's an interesting place to maybe explore hard problems around AI? Like I can't think of a more exciting time to be in the public sector than right now. It is a tremendous opportunity. The work that's being done, despite all of the challenges, all of the friction, the work that's being done across government to leverage and implement this technology in really compelling ways. If you go to ai.gov, they have the federal AI, like the federal use case inventory, where you can see all the different ways federal agencies are using AI. It's incredibly inspiring. So I'm just a huge proponent. I think about a lot, just the impact that it's had on my own career and how it's shaped what I'm doing today. And I don't believe there'd be anything more exciting than jumping into public service in this moment, given the opportunities that are at hand.
I agree. I think there's a lot of momentum happening, and not just at the federal level, as you mentioned, at the state and local level. And you talked a bit about some of the transformation happening in the education sector, which is really exciting. Just a final question, and then I'll open it up. Do you, if you had a crystal ball, which of course you do, no, but from your perch, do you see any signs that, AI is already starting to, it's more than just something that people are interested in learning about. It's actually something that is having a significant impact on how people do their jobs and the jobs that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I see it in my own work. I think anecdotally, I see it every day at Coursera, where we're being pushed from our CEO down to find compelling ways to leverage AI in your own workflows to make yourself better and to make the organization better. I see, we were having a conversation earlier this week with the chief data and AI officer in one of the states that we're working alongside, and he was just talking about different ways that their state and their state employees are leveraging AI. And so it does, a few years ago, I would have conversations about digital transformation broadly, kind of prior to this real significant focus that we see around AI. And it always felt a little bit like this looming challenge on the hill. It felt like this, or on the horizon, like, digital transformation, software engineering, it's a challenge, but we can face it in a few years. The conversations that we're having today around AI feel completely different. There's a level of urgency and a level of recognition that this is here and transformative, and we have to act. There's no other choice but to act. Has been, as I've stepped into this role, I think that's been the thing that stood out the most, is the level of urgency around this, that this isn't just something that's hypothetical. It's like, it's here, we have to act.
Do you think we're already behind?
I mean, I'd be really curious about the SCSP's perspective. I think I would go back to just the data and the scale. If I look through my lens of just the upskilling requirements in federal government, the upskilling requirements are profound. That may indicate that there's some catching up that we need to do, but I look towards what is like a solution-oriented, forward-looking piece, which is there's ways to tackle the problem and tackle the challenge, but we definitely don't have time to wait. There's definitely an urgency around it.
For sure. And thank you for taking that last question. Opening it up, does anybody have any questions in the room? Please introduce yourself.
Yep. So hi, everyone. I'm Mariam. I'm studying at Georgetown. Thank you so much, Sam, for all the insights. So I had actually two questions. So the first one is regarding the upskilling that you've been mentioning, the huge challenge. So I was wondering whether you think the upskilling challenge is more preeminent among mid-career professionals or those among top-level professionals, or it's also a huge challenge for those who just entered the workforce, because I would assume that this is then brings us back to the university level education, right? That needs to be also kind of engaged. So that's the first question I was wondering. And the second one, following up on your question about mid-career professionals. So, and you also have a very interesting career path moving from government sector. So could you maybe talk a little bit more about, so what would you say would be the ratio between learning by doing and jumping into, for example, tech policy and work on the emerging technology, and the amount of time you would still need to spend on actually learning things, for example, going through the courses that Coursera hosts or are using any other resources.
Yeah.
So how much would you really need to spend on learning before moving into the field if you are, let's say, a mid-career professional?
Yep. I mean, I'll hit your second question first. I'm always a proponent of just jump. And this is now like personally speaking, like I'm always a proponent of just like jump right in. But I think as I think about now bridging that to what I'm seeing in Coursera, like Coursera is a platform that's designed for adult learners, and it's designed with this tension that you just introduced, which is how do I jump in and start working and like not wait, but at the same time continue to build skills that I need to advance my career. And I think platforms like Coursera are designed with that tension in mind to help resolve it, of introduce ways to learn and upskill in a time and a place that accommodates a working adult, someone who actually has a job and is engaged in a career, but also is looking to advance that career through upskilling. I would say on your first question around, where from a leveling perspective are we seeing maybe the most need or most demand? It really is kind of across the board. I would say senior leaders is definitely, if I think about just what we're hearing in federal government, senior leader upskilling programs is very much a focus. And thinking about, how do we make general officers and SESs, senior executives in government, how do we give them kind of the literacy level understanding of this new technology that they need, maybe not as practitioners, but they do need a literacy level understanding to make really hard decisions that have broad implications. So there's very much an executive level component. There's a mid-career component, which is at the literacy level, but I would say it's also at the practitioner level, is how do you equip mid-career managers and mid-career individual contributors with the skills? And that's really where the rubber meets the road in these organizations. How do you give them the skills they need to actually apply the technology to these use cases? And then there is, we think about entry level. I've had conversations with with federal organizations that are thinking a lot about recruiting, and this concept of how do you make something like data literacy or AI literacy? This is now another military example, but everyone goes through basic first aid training when they come into the military. Like, what if there was a world where everyone coming in had basic data literacy and AI literacy training as just table stakes to what it means to serve? So we see it across. It's a bit of, I don't mean to have a non-answer for you, but we do genuinely see it across the board.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrew. One of the things that you mentioned was that it seems as though in government, the public sector, that we've sort of reached the point where AI sells itself, right? And so to think about AI and software in the grand scheme of the overall defense budget, obviously rounded to the nearest whole number and expressed as a percent, we're spending 0% on software. And so thinking about things in the general context of defense and specific products engineered toward defense, so like Palantir, Gotham, or AIP, that are specifically designed for defense purposes. Do you think that we will see that number changing in the future? Do you think that there's sort of calls for using AI for defense purposes and seeing what those capabilities can be? Or do you think that we're still kind of fighting the status quo, if you had to guess?
From my vantage, it does seem like there's momentum and change around it. I think one very specific example is the work that CDAO, the Chief Data and AI Office in DoD, is doing with their TradeWinds marketplace, like thinking of very very innovative and agile ways to do procurement around technology that's going to, whether or not it's like a specific AI tool or a tool that is additive or supportive to AI deployments, seeing organizations that are trying to, I don't want to say push the envelope because it's very much within the left and right limits of what you can do in government, but it's being really creative and innovative to recognize that there's a pacing challenge tied to this, which means that like we need to be able to figure out like not only how do we get the right tools in place, how do we do it legally and ethically, and also do it at the speed that's required to be relevant and not wait 3, 5, 10 years down the road. I would say I err on the side of as an optimistic realist, like recognizing that there are challenges and there's bureaucracy and there's friction, but I'm also optimistic seeing the work that's being done across the community to try to push change and push the department and push the government in not different directions, but in directions that can accelerate change.
More questions? Go ahead.
I'm Jeffrey Franken, student at Georgetown by evening, but I'm also a career government professional, introducing some of these things here at work. One of the things that is a little bit concerning to me is a lot of these concepts in AI, especially around governance, safety, bias, that sort of thing, they're a little bit in flux. And similarly with some of the technology issues, I think are somewhat in flux. For example, people still talk a whole lot about hallucination with, that issue, at least from my perspective, using the tools has gone significantly down. And my question is, when you have all these concepts that you need to kind of introduce to people and get right so that they're on a good footing to start, how do you, I guess, approach that issue that some of the grounds that you're setting might be ready to shift in a given time?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And this dynamic nature of technology changes fast. And when you're thinking about upskilling and training programs, you need to have ones that are dynamic and responsive to that. As I think about, how to respond, I think it points to two things. One of the things that we've seen most impactful in our federal partnerships is not just relying solely on the Coursera content, but also layering in agency-specific content as well. So this goes back to the specificity point we were talking about previously, is thinking about, how do you have a course from Google that's then wrapped with agency-specific content? And that maybe is like policy, maybe it's security guidance, maybe it's ethical considerations, but something that then takes this, what is essentially commercially off the shelf available content, and wraps it with something that's highly specific that can also be modified as policies, procedures, processes change internally. On the flip side, when I think back to my own experience in government, oftentimes, internally developed training programs can take years to overhaul. Like we're talking like years to overhaul that curriculum. And so it goes back a little bit to the acquisition discussion we were just having, but there's a pacing component to training as well. Whenever you're talking about upskilling around technology, is how do you ensure that you have a program that's not only specific to your organization, but can be dynamic and keep pace with technology as it's changing as well. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen organizations look to Coursera to provide, is they would say, look, we have a broad partnership with Defense Acquisition University. You can look it up on Google. And one of the things that they'll tell us is, I can teach someone how to be an acquisitions professional. I need your help keeping pace with technology change, and we'll layer in the acquisition specifics. And so I think that interplay, and I think it speaks to the strength of the types of partnerships that we've built. Sir.
Nice to meet you. So Victor Piotrowski, National Science Foundation. So I've been thinking for last 12 months about lessons learned in developing cybersecurity workforce, and thinking, can we be in 5 years where it took us 25 years in cybersecurity? Can we use some of those approaches, and what are the critical elements in the ecosystem? So the first thing is, after 25 years developing cybersecurity workforce, I'm focusing on federal government mostly. We have 1 in 3 positions in government unfilled, and we have 1 in 3 positions nationally unfilled. It's orders of magnitude differences, but in the same proportion, 1 in 3 unfilled. And the government in cybersecurity just recently essentially abandoning mentioning any degree while advertising for cybersecurity positions, right? That is something that is being implemented as we speak. That everything will be skill-based, right? You cannot even mention the desire this degree, right? Everything will be skill-based. So that is one thing, like that your approach is attractive, that's stackable and other approaches. If we are going to measure skills, I don't need to worry that I will have to go and get a specific degree. But at the same time, the challenge will be how to measure those skills, right? How to assess those skills from the candidate. That means we need to have some competency model, right? That competency model on the side, like of the work roles that are needed, but then do they map to competencies that your courses teach?
Mhm.
So have you, that's what I'm saying, have you put any work in this direction to trying to create some kind of like framework or model, define those competencies for different work roles and somehow, help government with hiring those skill-based approach?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And I'll point to three things that stand out to me that are some of the ways that we're trying to get after, because it's a critical problem. We hear a lot around skill-based. There's a lot of excitement around skill-based hiring, but then there is, when you drill into the details, the how becomes somewhat complex. I would say there's three things that we're doing that start to address that. One is we measure skill development on our platform. And that skill development is not based on, it's not a binary, did someone complete the course or not? It's not just based on course completion. Instead, it's based on how well someone did in the assessments. And the assessments that we have built into the Coursera platform are based on our teaching and learning team's kind of pedagogy best practices. So it includes a variety of different modalities around assessment types that range from kind of a standard type test all the way to an actual hands-on application. So that's one piece, is actually measuring skills based on how well someone's done on the assessments inside of the program. The second piece, and this goes now to the power of our institutional partners, Coursera has pedagogical standards that we require our partners to adhere to. But when a partner produces content on Coursera, it's that institutional subject matter expert that's saying, in order to be it's the expert at IBM saying, in order to be a cybersecurity professional, in order to earn this credential, in order to build these skills, these are the standards and these are the assessments that we're going to layer into this piece of content in order to make sure someone clears that benchmark. So that's two ways that we're doing it across the board on our platform. And we've introduced a tremendous amount of academic integrity tools into the platform to ensure that we're maintaining academic integrity across those assessments. The final piece that I think is really important to your question around government specifically is that governments are now coming to us and using a tool on our platform called Course Builder to build their own content and assessments. So now you can imagine a world where they're leveraging content for upskilling on Coursera, they being the government, but then they've also built their own custom assessments that are attached to that or a part of that, where they can validate skills in a way that's unique to the government, or maybe test for skills in a way that's unique to the government. So I think those handful of things of the assessments, the way they're integrated into Coursera, the academic integrity attached to those, how the content's produced and who is assessing what level that skill development needs to be at to earn a specific credential, and then custom assessment development through our federal partners to further assess skill development beyond maybe what just the course is offering.
Can I to blend some of these questions, and I love what you're trying to get after here. Have you seen any, so this is a part of that. Have you seen any of your partner organizations using these assessments or building the completion of these courses or the obtaining of a credential, whether stackable or not, into performance evaluation, into performance metrics or position descriptions or anything like that.
Yeah, we've seen organizations that I would say are going in that direction. We've seen interest around how do we now connect the like skill development and course completion and credential attainment to something that is actually formalized in the professional development structure of that agency. I would say the place that we've seen maybe the quickest advancement around that is at the state and local level. We're actually able to create custom content pathways on our platform and then have a custom credential or badge on top of it, which is what we've seen some state and local governments do, where they'll create a custom pathway that's aligned to a very specific requirement that they have, and then put their own state-sanctioned custom credential on top of it to say, this is the state of X credential for this topic. And so there's no reason it couldn't be done. I would say I know there's a tremendous amount of complexity on the kind of personnel system side, but there is, from a platform perspective, we could absolutely move in that direction. We see organizations wanting to move that way as well.
It's almost like skills-based promotion.
That's right.
Right. I think we have time for one more question if there are any. Jason.
So there's 20 million public servants in the country. I'm curious about the differences that you see working with your state and locals versus the federal. And specifically, as I understand it, a lot of times there's a state administrative agency that might have responsibility for all government agencies in that whole state. So that gives you kind of more of a one-stop shop to get at scale in that state versus in the government where you might have to find the person in the program office who cares about this.
Yeah.
Although you do have top leaders who care about this. How does that all play into going faster, leaning into this, continuing to give people these skills and the opportunity to move forward? And are there lessons learned from one side or the other that can help us, particularly in the federal side? Because what I see is the environment so bifurcated. You have to bring so many more people along to get after the workforce things because so many people own parts of the puzzle.
Yeah, it is a really good question. It's at the state level, I would say there is a bit more centralization, but it still requires a network of constituents and champions across state government to build decentralized programs. I would say one of the key voices that we've often found is a technical leader, is a CTO, is a CIO, is someone who has the technical depth to really step in and say, have a strong point of view on saying, these are the types of skills our organization needs to develop, and then partners alongside someone who has purview over the workforce development component of the equation. And that partnership often is one that becomes very powerful because you have the technical expert advocating alongside the training and human resources expert. And so that combination has been one that we've seen be really important. The second piece, like the lesson, you asked for a lesson learned, like one core lesson learned is, well, before getting to the lesson learned, one piece that I think has made the ability to get to scale a little bit less complicated and we've seen a willingness for organizations to work through this tendency to be bifurcated is a focus on literacy to start. There's generally a fairly common understanding or common agreement across agencies to say, yes, at a high level, we agree that these are broadly the things that we need to focus on to build AI literacy across our workforce. And that usually allows and provides a fairly safe starting point to get after some of the scale. When you get very specific about like these tools, these skills for these roles, then it starts to get much more agency or even team specific. The final thing that I'll say in terms of lesson learned is we have seen a tremendous amount of power in organizations that are willing to have a centralized program that provides scale across an organization where you reduce the friction and you're able to standardize, you reduce the friction of just individual teams going and pursuing their own individualized solutions. Instead, you centralize it, can put controls around it, and then you can also track the analytics to understand what's the ROI that we're seeing across our organization, and implement a more not holistic, but consistent program aligned to what their specific agency or organization's goals are. So organizations that are willing to go at scale first, we've definitely seen efficiencies or their ability to affect change more deliberately.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Please, everyone join me. Joining online, for those who are here with us, please grab a snack. Let's continue the conversation. Feel free to stick around, ask questions, and thank you so much for coming to our launch event. We'll see you next class.
I'm just here.